You're watching HQ Spotlight. We are entering year 2 of the expanded CFP, and we're taking a look at the 12 teams that made the field last season. Of course, your champs, Ohio State beating out Notre Dame. For the Natty, ASU, Boise State having magical seasons in their own right, Texas, Penn State, Oregon, UGA. So who is going to be back for the 2025 season and running it back again, making a deep postseason run, and maybe even getting a natty? Are we going to have a different champion? Is it going to be Ohio State? So here to kind of bring out his crystal ball and try to predict things is Richard Johnson. And you're going to tell us, Richard, who you think is going to be back in the CFP, right? And we're starting with Clemson, which is very interesting, right? Because Dabo doesn't have the same approach when it comes to the transfer portal as all of these other teams that we see, right? So I'm interested to know why you think his approach is going to strike twice and they're going to get back to the CFP with the way that he likes to do things in terms of recruiting, which is a lot of homegrown talent, which is not something that we see in this day and age in college football.
Well, Jacqueline, we have to give Dabo a little bit of credit here because Dabo has slowly but surely evolved with the times, right? He brings in Will Helt, a defensive end from Purdue this year. Jacqueline, that is the first scholarship defensive player that Clemson has added in the portal at all. So slowly but surely an old dog is learning new tricks, and that's one of the reasons why I think Clemson is an odds-on favorite, obviously, to win the ACC for sure. But in my estimation, inside track to a top 4 seed and a bye. Tristan Smith, the wide receiver they brought in from Southeast Missouri State, on the outside is sort of like a Mike Williams build, a lanky wide receiver, a deep playmaking threat to augment what they already have on offense. I think Cade Klubnik's a good quarterback, and I think they have good pieces. So you add him, you add help with Peter Woods up front on defense, and you really have something here. And also, Dabo went outside of the family for those coordinators, right? Garrett Riley, Tom Allen, those are not homegrown Clemson coaches. So he's adapted, maybe not on the timeline that Clemson fans would like, but he has adapted.
Yeah, to your point, I think last season we had like the transfer comparison with FSU and Clemson, and it was like 0 and like more than 40 or something. Now we got a graphic with like 3 guys on it. So baby steps, right? Okay, let's go to Oregon. This is another team you think is going to run it back. And we've had some CFP predictions where Oregon is in it, not getting a bye. So maybe that'll go better for them this time around, Richard.
Yeah, you know, Oregon obviously trying to come through the Big Ten, it's going to be something of a murderer's row. They're going to have to deal with Penn State. They're going to have to deal with Ohio State to try to win a Big Ten championship and try to get that bye. It's going to be a difficult slate for them. But Oregon, to me, is like last year's Ohio State in that their roster was just absolutely loaded coming into the season. And then what did they do in the portal? Well, they went and got the best pieces, right? Ohio State went and got Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs from the portal last season. Oregon goes and gets Isaiah World, who's an incredible left tackle from Nevada, and Makai Hughes at running back from Tulane. So what Oregon has done is said, we got a great team. We're just going to add great free agent pieces to augment what we have. And so for me, Oregon comes in as a top 2 program this season as far as national title odds and chances are.
So I know we saw the schedule, and it's going to be kind of a difficult path to get to the CFP for Oregon in the Big Ten. But now we got to talk about Texas, who has to go through the SEC, right, to get there. And Texas, in their first year in the SEC last season, they get to the SEC championship. They lose in the Cotton Bowl to Ohio State. But why is this squad under Sark poised, in your opinion, to kind of do just the same here in year 2 in the SEC?
Well, let's start with the obvious. Arch. I mean, Arch Manning coming into this Texas system, I think allows Texas to just be a little bit more varied on offense, to do different things. I think they were a little bit limited with Quinn Ewers last season on offense. Yes, I know Quinn Ewers was nursing a core muscle injury for the better part of the season, but you saw their limitations, especially in the red zone. Texas was great last season, but they were mid in the red zone. They were just middle of the pack as far as touchdown conversions is concerned. So they need to get better at finishing drives to get over the hump. We're not talking about can Texas beat Vanderbilt or Mississippi State at the end of October. We're talking about can Texas win 3 or 4 games in January, and that's difficult. But besides the offense, when you look at the defense Texas has also up front in the middle is going to be, I think, what really determines how good Texas can be as far as going to get a national championship. Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw, Justice Terry. These are new pieces up front in the middle at defensive tackle. The core of Texas's defense has been their strength over the last few years, the spine of that defense. Can it be that again with transfer portal parts? That's going to be what really determines if Texas can go over the top in January.
Yeah, in Texas, that schedule, it's starting off spicy with Ohio State, first game out of the gate. Let's go to Penn State because they're on your list as well. And the narrative around James Franklin for much of last season was like, can he finally have his team show up in the big moments? I feel like we can move past that now, but why do you think that Penn State and James Franklin can build on the season that we saw last season for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, Jacqueline, it's definitely put up or shut up time for Penn State, right? Last year, they got to the semifinal, but look, the path was easy. It was SMU at home. It was a Boise State team that had a transcendent player, but was clearly not up to snuff as far as being as good as Penn State. All right, now you've got all the expectation in the world for Penn State. Unfortunately, we know what happens when Penn State has all the expectation in the world. So for me, anything less than a Big Ten championship berth and a semifinal run is a failure for Penn State. I think Penn State has all the pieces. They looked at that roster and they said, man, our wide receiver room is not going to get it done. Kyron Hudson in, Devontae Ross in, Trevor Pena in at wideout. They turned over that whole wide receiver core to try to give Drew Aller better targets to throw to try to be more dynamic. We know what they have at running back. What are they going to be in the passing game? Defense with Jim Knowles in to coordinate that side of the ball, I think that'll be really, really good. But I think Penn State goes as that offense goes, especially as far as explosive plays in the passing game.
All right, Penn State, I'm sorry. I was trying to get the pressure off of you, but Richard says, no, expectations are even higher for this upcoming season. Let's go to Notre Dame because the conversation there is always, how difficult is the pathway for an independent to get to the CFP and Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame? Do they get all the way to the championship? Why do you think there are the tools to get back there, to get back to the CFP for the squad?
Well, I just think they're going to be healthy this year, Jacqueline. I mean, CJ Carr is actually going to be on the field this year, for instance. He's a guy who got hurt at quarterback in camp last year. He didn't even get a chance to battle it out with Riley Leonard and show what he can do. That offensive line, we saw how Notre Dame, frankly, persevered through a rash of offensive line injuries to get to the national championship game. Frankly, heroic from Notre Dame to be able to get there. Jeremiah Love also hurt. Coming into that national title game, not at 100%. I just think that Notre Dame, healthy, dangerous.
So there's a couple of surefire things in life, Richard. Death, taxes, and that Georgia is probably going to be in the CFP. UGA, they get there for the fourth time overall, the third time in the last 4 seasons. So no surprise that we're talking about Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs making their way back to the college football playoff.
Yeah, of course. But as we talked about with Penn State, how's this passing game going to go for Georgia, right? Gunnar Stockton, I know he didn't see a lot of him. He comes in after the SEC championship game when Carson Beck gets hurt. But what can Georgia do in the passing game? You bring in Zach Branch from USC. He's more of a gadget player to me, not necessarily a fully formed receiver. We'll see if Georgia is able to coach him up to be able to get production from him. Dylan Bell's a great player out wide, but we've got to see if Georgia's got the passing game to really make hay in January. They did not look as fast as Notre Dame did in that Sugar Bowl loss that they took in the playoff last year. And I don't want to say it's indicative of a step back for the Dogs because we know how loaded they are, but they got to prove that they're still upper echelon in college football, not just close.
And Richard's final team, he has Ohio State, of course, the defending champs, getting back to the CFP. Richard, we certainly appreciate it as we're trying to predict what teams are going to run it back in year 2 in the expanded college football playoff. Getting a look at the odds to win it all, Texas, they are the favorites at plus 550. Then we have the defending champs, Ohio State and Georgia, next up at 6-1, followed by Penn State and Oregon at plus 950.